Sarah Ellis stood at the loading dock, her application crushed in her fist, the foreman's laughter still ringing in her ears. "We need someone who can handle the physical demands," he'd said, eyeing her size. She'd heard it all before. Too big, too slow, too much of a liability. Outside, rain pelted the parking lot as tears blurred her vision. This was the 5th rejection this month, and rent was due next week. Her mother's medical bills wouldn't pay themselves. In her car, Sarah caught her reflection in the rearview mirror and saw something beyond the hurt, a quiet determination taking root. What these people saw as weakness, she would transform into her greatest strength. But in a world that judges books by their covers, could someone like her ever get the chance to show what she was truly made of? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The key in Sarah's hand trembled as she unlocked her apartment door. The smell of vegetable soup, her mother's recipe, greeted her, a small comfort after a day of rejection. She hung her rain-soaked jacket on the hook by the door, careful to plaster on a smile before entering the living room that doubled as her mother's bedroom. "There's my girl," Eleanor Ellis called from her adjustable bed, oxygen tubes framing her face. Despite her illness, her eyes remained bright. "How did the interview go?" Sarah busied herself adjusting her mother's blankets. "Fine. They said they'll call." The lie tasted bitter, but Eleanor had enough worries without adding Sarah's job rejections to the list. Eleanor patted her daughter's hand. "They'd be lucky to have you." On the coffee table, a stack of medical bills sat in various stages of past due, their red warnings visible even from across the room. Sarah slipped them into a drawer before her mother could see her expression. "You've got to stop worrying about me and those bills," Eleanor said, always more perceptive than Sarah gave her credit for. "I've lived my life. You need to live yours." "I am living, Mom, and I'm going to get us caught up." Sarah poured herself a bowl of soup, grateful for the warmth between her hands. "The right job is out there." Later, after her mother had fallen asleep to the quiet hum of late-night television, Sarah spread the bills across the kitchen table. The largest was from the hospital, $4, $2.35 for Eleanor's last emergency visit. The others were for medications, oxygen deliveries, and specialist consultations. Sarah's meager savings had evaporated months ago. A text message lit up her phone. "Maya, bad day? The leftover scones are calling your name." Sarah smiled despite herself. Maya Rodriguez had been her friend since middle school, before the weight gain, before the bullying became relentless, before Sarah started to believe what others said about her. Now Maya owned Cornerstone Cafe, a small but thriving business 3 blocks from Sarah's apartment. "Be there in 10, Sarah texted back. The cafe was officially closed, but Maya had the back door propped open. The warm, cinnamon-scented air embraced Sarah as she entered. "That bad, huh?" Maya asked, noting Sarah's expression. She pushed a plate with 2 blueberry scones and a steaming mug of tea across the counter. The foreman actually laughed. Sarah sank onto a stool. "I don't think he meant to, but when he saw me and looked at my application for warehouse work—" "His loss," Maya said firmly. "But honestly, Sarah, have you thought about trying something different? Something less physical?" Sarah broke off a piece of scone. "Like what?" "I've applied for receptionist positions, customer service roles, retail jobs. Nobody wants to put me in front of customers. And data entry requires experience I don't have." "What about here? I could use weekend help." The offer was tempting, but Sarah knew Maya's business was just staying afloat. "You can't afford another employee. Maybe not full-time, but I appreciate it, but I need something that can cover Mom's bills. Something with benefits eventually." Sarah sipped her tea. "The warehouse jobs pay well and they're always hiring. Or they would be, if they'd look past." She gestured to her body. "Remember Mrs. Hathaway's class?" Maya asked suddenly. "That career project we did." Sarah smiled at the memory. You wanted to be a pastry chef in Paris. And you wanted to be a structural engineer. You built that bridge out of popsicle sticks that held more weight than anyone else's. That was a lifetime ago. My point is, you've always been good at understanding how things work, how to make them stronger. Maya leaned forward. Those warehouse managers are idiots if they can't see that strength comes in different forms. On her way home, a pink notice on the apartment door made Sarah's heart sink. Final notice. Rent due or eviction proceedings will begin. The landlord had been patient, but patience had limits. Just like Sarah's options. In her bedroom, she pulled out her laptop and began the nightly ritual of scanning job listings. Her gaze lingered on another warehouse position. This one at Donnelly Shipping, a smaller operation across town. The listing emphasized experience, which she lacked, but mentioned nothing about physical requirements. Before she could talk herself out of it, Sarah sent her resume. Then she crawled into bed, her mind replaying the foreman's dismissive glance, trying to replace it with determination instead of despair. Tomorrow would be different. It had to be. The community center's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Sarah pushed through the glass doors, clutching her worn gym membership card. She hadn't used it in months, but the monthly fee was low enough to justify keeping it active. The card had become more of a hope than a practice, a small plastic reminder of intentions repeatedly postponed. Well, look who's back from the dead. A gruff voice called from the weight room doorway. Mr. Bennett stood with arms crossed over his chest, his 70-year-old frame still impressively muscular. The retired high school coach had been running the community center's fitness programs for as long as Sarah could remember. Just needed some time away, Sarah replied, avoiding his knowing gaze. 6 months is more than some time. He gestured for her to follow him into the weight room. But better late than never. The room smelled of disinfectant and sweat. Sarah's mind flashed back to 3 years ago, when she'd first started coming here after her father's death. Grief and stress had accelerated her weight gain, and she'd hoped exercise would reverse it. For a while, she'd been dedicated, showing up 5 days a week. You were making good progress before you stopped, Mr. Bennett said, as if reading her thoughts. Didn't seem to matter. Sarah ran her hand over a dumbbell rack. Lost 15 pounds in 4 months. And people still saw the same person. People see what they expect to see. He picked up a clipboard from a nearby bench. But that's their problem, not yours. What brings you back? Before Sarah could answer, the door swung open and a group of men entered, laughing loudly. They wore uniform shirts with Meridian Shipping emblazoned across the back. Coach, one called out, we need that circuit training you promised. Peak season's coming, and the new guys aren't ready. Sarah stepped aside, making herself small despite her size, a habit developed over years of trying to avoid attention. In a minute, Alvarez, Mr. Bennett called back. Warming up first won't kill you. As the men moved to the cardio equipment, Sarah overheard their conversation. Mercer's on the warpath again, a stocky man complained. Says we're understaffed but rejects every application that comes through. That's because Victor Mercer thinks everybody should look like his son. 6'2" and built like a linebacker, another replied. The name sent a chill through Sarah. Victor Mercer owned Meridian Shipping, the company where she'd been rejected just yesterday. And twice before that over the past year. You know him? Mr. Bennett asked, noticing her reaction. We've met, Sarah said dryly. He wasn't impressed. Mr. Bennett snorted. Victor Mercer wouldn't be impressed by anyone who couldn't immediately benefit him. Man's been a self-important jackass since high school. A news segment playing on the wall-mounted TV caught Sarah's attention. The anchor was discussing the upcoming holiday shipping season, predicted to be the busiest on record. Labor shortages continue to plague the shipping industry, the reporter said. Companies are offering signing bonuses and increased wages, but still struggle to fill positions. Mr. Bennett followed her gaze. Ironic, isn't it? They're desperate for workers but still picky about who they hire. Sarah watched the warehouse workers now setting up for their circuit training. They complained about long hours and physical demands, yet here they were, preparing their bodies for exactly that work. "I don't need to lose weight," she said suddenly, the realization crystallizing. "I need to be stronger." Mr. Bennett's eyebrows shot up. Now that's an interesting shift in perspective. All these warehouse jobs, they're concerned about lifting capacity, endurance, actual functional ability, Sarah continued. Not how someone looks in uniform. True enough. Mr. Bennett tapped his clipboard thoughtfully. Though some managers can't see past appearances. Sarah thought of the family photo album at home, filled with images of her younger self, before the bullying, before her father's death, before food became both comfort and enemy. She'd spent years trying to get back to that version of herself. "I'm tired of chasing someone I used to be," she said. "What if instead, I become someone new, someone stronger?" Mr. Bennett's face broke into a slow smile. "Now that's something I can help with. Functional strength is about what your body can do, not how it looks doing it." Sarah glanced again at the warehouse workers, now groaning through a set of squats. "Those jobs require specific movements, specific strengths," Mr. Bennett continued, following her thought process. "Train for those, and you'd have something concrete to show an employer." For the first time in months, Sarah felt a flutter of genuine hope. Not the desperate kind that came with each new job application, but something solid and actionable. "When can we start?" she asked. Mr. Bennett handed her the clipboard. "Fill this out while I finish with these yahoos. Then we'll talk specifics." As Sarah completed the fitness assessment form, the TV continued its report on the shipping crisis. A solution was forming in her mind, not about changing who she was, but about proving what she could do. Sunday dinners at Aunt Patricia's house were a family tradition Sarah usually enjoyed. Today, surrounded by well-meaning relatives in a kitchen filled with the aroma of pot roast, she felt like an exhibit under evaluation. "I know a doctor who does that new gastric procedure," Cousin Debbie said, passing the mashed potatoes. "My friend Marjorie lost 80 pounds. Insurance covered most of it." Sarah nodded politely, having heard similar suggestions countless times. "I'm focusing more on strength training right now." "Oh, honey," Aunt Patricia interjected. "That's admirable, but wouldn't it be easier to just—" She made a vague gesture with her hands that somehow conveyed both surgical reduction and surrender. Uncle Paul cleared his throat. "Speaking of jobs, my buddy Frank is desperate for help at his warehouse. Holiday rush is starting, and they're short-staffed." "Where's his warehouse?" Sarah asked, trying not to sound too eager. "Donnelly Shipping over on Industrial Parkway. But it's heavy work, Sarah. Probably not your thing." Sarah took a long sip of water, swallowing the urge to explain that she'd already applied there. "I might surprise you." Later, after helping with dishes, Sarah found herself alone in the living room. The family photo albums were neatly arranged on the bottom shelf of Aunt Patricia's bookcase. She pulled out the one labeled Ellis Family 2005 to 2010. There she was at 14, bright-eyed, average-sized, standing proudly beside her science fair project. Before her father's sudden heart attack. Before the cruel high school years. Before the comfort eating and the depression. "You look so much like your father there," Eleanor said, wheeling herself into the room. Despite Sarah's insistence that she rest, her mother had insisted on joining the family dinner. Sarah closed the album. "I miss him." "He'd be proud of you," Eleanor said. "Your determination, that Ellis stubbornness. Lot of good it's doing me." Sarah couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "I can't even find a job to pay our bills." Eleanor reached for her daughter's hand. "When your father lost his construction job during the recession, he spent 6 months being rejected before he found something. Know what he told me? Everyone's looking at what I can't do anymore because of my back injury. I need to show them what I can do instead. The words echoed Mr. Bennett's philosophy. Sarah squeezed her mother's hand. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise, Eleanor winked. You've just been too busy being stubborn to notice. Back at their apartment that night, Sarah opened her laptop and searched physical requirements warehouse job. Most listings mentioned the ability to lift 50 to 75 pounds, stand for long periods, and operate equipment. None specified a weight limit for employees, though many required passing a physical capacity test. Sarah created a spreadsheet. In one column, she listed the physical requirements from various warehouse job postings. In another, she noted her current capabilities based on her session with Mr. Bennett. The gap was significant but not insurmountable. A notification popped up, a response from Donnelly Shipping. They were reviewing applications and would be in touch soon. Not a rejection, at least not yet. Sarah leaned back, rubbing her tired eyes. The late hour cast shadows across the small apartment, but for the first time in months, her mind felt clear. All this time, she'd been trying to shrink herself to fit others' expectations. What if, instead, she expanded her capabilities to exceed them? She pulled out a notebook and began writing. At the top of the page, she wrote, "Operations stronger than they know." Below it, she outlined a plan. 1. Train with Mr. Bennett 5 days per week. 2. Research warehouse operations. 3. Practice specific movements required for the job. 4. Apply at smaller warehouses first. 5. Document progress and capabilities. It wasn't about proving others wrong anymore. It was about proving herself right. When her alarm went off the next morning, instead of hitting snooze, Sarah got up immediately. She laid out workout clothes she hadn't worn in months. The stretchy fabric felt foreign against her skin, but she pushed aside the discomfort. "Morning, Mom," she said, poking her head into the living room. "I'm heading to the community center before I start job hunting today." Eleanor looked up from her crossword puzzle, surprise evident. "That's new. New day, new approach." Sarah filled a water bottle. "I've been thinking about what Dad would do. He'd tackle the problem head-on," Eleanor said, usually with more confidence than sense. Sarah laughed. Maybe the Ellis stubbornness isn't such a bad thing after all. As she walked to the community center in the early morning light, Sarah mentally prepared for the training ahead. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever was. But for the first time since the rejections began, she felt a sense of control returning. She wasn't at the mercy of others' perceptions anymore. This time, she would give them something they couldn't ignore. Undeniable, measurable strength. "I'm not going to lie to you," Mr. Bennett said, clipboard in hand as he circled Sarah. "This isn't going to be easy, and it isn't going to be fast." The community center was quiet at 6 a.m., just as Sarah had hoped. No audience for her first assessment. "I don't need easy or fast," Sarah replied, standing in workout clothes for the first time in months. "I need effective." Mr. Bennett nodded approvingly. "Let's establish your baseline then." The next hour was humbling. Push-ups modified, pull-ups assisted, squats, lunges, and various lifts. Mr. Bennett recorded everything without comment, his expression neutral. "Okay," he said finally. "Here's what I'm seeing." Sarah braced herself for disappointment. "You're actually stronger than you give yourself credit for," he said, surprising her. "Particularly your legs and core. Your endurance needs work, and your upper body strength is uneven, but there's a solid foundation here." "Really?" Sarah couldn't hide her surprise. "You've been carrying around extra weight for years," he said matter-of-factly. "That's strength training in itself. Now we just need to optimize it." He scribbled on the clipboard. "I'm designing a program specifically for warehouse work. Lifting techniques, grip strength, stamina." Hope flickered in Sarah's chest. "When do we start?" "We already have. Mr. Bennett handed her a water bottle. 3 days a week here with me, 2 days on your own. No excuses. Sarah took a long drink. No excuses. After showering, Sarah walked to Cornerstone Cafe. The morning rush was in full swing, with Maya darting between tables. Take a seat at the counter, Maya called. Be with you in a sec. Sarah perched on a stool, listening to the conversations around her. 2 men in business attire at the table behind her caught her attention. Donnelly can't handle the holiday volume, one said. Not with their outdated systems. Mercer's been trying to buy them out for years, the other replied. Frank's just being stubborn. Frank Donnelly's stubbornness is costing the whole region. The shipping delays last December were a nightmare. Sarah turned slightly, trying to appear casual while eavesdropping. The Gazette ran an article yesterday about the labor shortage, the first man continued. Says warehouses are hiring anyone with a pulse, but they still can't meet demand. Maya appeared with a steaming mug. On the house. You look like you need it. Actually, I need something else, Sarah said quietly. Is that job offer still good? Even just part-time? Maya's eyebrows shot up. Seriously? What changed? I need income while I'm training for something better. Sarah wrapped her hands around the warm mug. Mr. Bennett's helping me get physically ready for warehouse work. Warehouse work? Still? Maya frowned. After how they've treated you? It pays well, has benefits, and there's high demand. Sarah took a sip of coffee. And I'm done letting others decide what I'm capable of. Maya studied her friend for a moment, then nodded. Weekends and Tuesday evenings. That's when I need the most help. Perfect. Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. At least she'd have some income, even if it wouldn't cover everything. As she headed home, Sarah passed a newspaper vending machine. The headline caught her eye. Holiday shipping crisis looms. Warehouses desperately seeking workers. She dropped in some change and took a copy. The article detailed how local shipping companies were struggling to staff up for the holiday rush, with Donnelly Shipping specifically mentioned as being in a precarious position. The final paragraph quoted Frank Donnelly. We're looking for dedicated workers who can handle the physical demands of the job. Experience is preferred but not required for the right candidate. Sarah's phone buzzed with an email notification. Donnelly Shipping wanted an interview tomorrow morning. Heart racing, she called the number provided. After 2 rings, a gruff voice answered. Donnelly Shipping. Hello. This is Sarah Ellis returning about the interview request. Right? The application for warehouse associate. Papers shuffled in the background. Can you be here at 9 a.m.? Yes, absolutely. Good. Ask for Frank. The line went dead. Sarah stood on the sidewalk, staring at her phone. Frank himself would interview her, the owner. Either they were truly desperate or this was how a small operation worked. When she got home, Sarah researched Donnelly Shipping thoroughly. Founded 30 years ago by Frank Donnelly, it remained independent while most local shipping companies had been absorbed by larger corporations. They specialized in regional distribution, with a reputation for reliability despite outdated facilities. That night, she laid out her most professional outfit: black pants, a blue button-down shirt, and comfortable but presentable shoes. Her one interview suit no longer fit, but this would have to do. As she ironed her shirt, Eleanor watched from her wheelchair. You seem different, her mother observed. More focused. Sarah smiled. I have a plan this time, and it's not about trying to be something I'm not. That's my girl. Eleanor's eyes shone with pride. They won't know what hit them. Donnelly Shipping occupied a weathered brick building with a faded blue sign. The parking lot was half filled with employee vehicles, mostly older models with dents and rust spots. Sarah parked her 15-year-old Honda among them, feeling like at least her car fit in. The reception area consisted of a small desk with a harried-looking woman juggling phone calls. She barely looked up when Sarah entered. I'm here to see Frank, Sarah said when the receptionist hung up. I have an interview at 9. The woman gave Sarah a quick once-over, her expression shifting to something Sarah recognized all too well, doubt mixed with pity. Have a seat. I'll let him know you're here. Sarah sat on a vinyl chair that had seen better days, watching workers hustle through the area. Most carried clipboards or spoke into radios, their movements purposeful and quick. 10 minutes later, a door opened, and a man in his 60s emerged. His weathered face and calloused hands spoke of decades of physical work. Sarah Ellis? He called, scanning the empty reception area before his eyes landed on her. She stood, extending her hand. Yes, sir. Thank you for the interview opportunity. Frank's handshake was firm but not showy. Come on back. Sorry for the wait, shipping crisis doesn't observe interview schedules. His office was utilitarian, metal desk, filing cabinets, and windows overlooking the warehouse floor. Sarah's application sat open on his desk. So, Frank said, settling into his chair, no warehouse experience. No, sir, Sarah admitted, but I'm a fast learner and physically capable of handling the job requirements. Frank's expression remained neutral. You understand this is physical work? Lifting, moving, standing all day. I do. I've been training specifically for this type of work. Frank raised an eyebrow. Training? Yes, sir. I've been working with a strength coach to ensure I can meet the physical demands. Sarah sat straight, refusing to be diminished. I can already lift the 50 pounds specified in your job posting, and I'm working to increase that capacity. Frank leaned back. Most applicants just say they can handle it without putting in the work first. Points for preparation. He asked standard interview questions about availability, transportation reliability, and ability to work overtime. Sarah answered confidently, prepared for each query. Why warehousing? Frank finally asked. Most people don't choose it, they fall into it. Sarah considered her answer carefully. It offers stability, decent pay, and benefits without requiring specialized education. And I like the concrete nature of the work. At the end of the day, you can see what you've accomplished. Frank nodded slowly. Fair enough. He closed her file. Here's the situation, Ms. Ellis. I'm short-staffed, and the holiday rush is starting. I've got 2 options. Hire someone with experience who might not stick around, or take a chance on someone inexperienced who seems committed. Sarah held her breath. I believe in seeing what people can actually do, not what their resume says, Frank continued. So I'm offering you a 1-day trial. Come in tomorrow, work a full shift. If you can handle it, and if my floor supervisor thinks you're trainable, we'll talk about a temporary position. Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. I won't let you down. Call me Frank. Everyone does. He stood, signaling the end of the interview. Be here at 6 a.m. Wear something you don't mind getting dirty, and bring a lunch. Jason will be your supervisor for the day. As Frank walked her out, they passed through a section of the warehouse. Workers moved quickly among tall shelves stacked with boxes. Forklifts beeped as they navigated narrow aisles, and a steady hum of activity filled the space. A tall man with a clipboard watched their approach, his expression darkening when he spotted Sarah. Jason, Frank called. This is Sarah. She's doing a trial run tomorrow. You'll be showing her the ropes. Jason gave a curt nod, his assessment of Sarah clear in his narrowed eyes. We're already behind schedule, Frank. Which is why we need more hands, Frank replied firmly. She'll be here at 6. After they moved on, Sarah asked, Is he always that friendly? Frank's mouth twitched. Jason's my nephew. Good worker. Knows the business inside and out, but he's got strong opinions about who fits here. Outside, Frank offered his hand again. Most people don't make it through the first day. Nothing personal if it doesn't work out. I understand, Sarah replied, but I'll be back tomorrow. Driving home, Sarah's stomach churned with equal parts excitement and anxiety. One day to prove herself. One chance to show what she could do rather than have assumptions made about her capabilities. She stopped at the community center, finding Mr. Bennett in his office. "I got a trial day tomorrow," she announced without preamble. "What should I focus on tonight to prepare?" Mr. Bennett didn't look surprised. "Hydrate, stretch, get good sleep, and remember, pace yourself. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Any other advice?" "Yeah." He met her eyes. "Some people will be watching for you to fail. Don't give them the satisfaction." That evening, Sarah laid out her clothes, sturdy jeans, a moisture-wicking t-shirt, and the steel-toed boots she'd splurged on after her first paycheck from Maya's cafe. She set 3 alarms, prepared her lunch, and filled a large water bottle. "Big day tomorrow?" Eleanor asked as Sarah moved purposefully around the apartment. "The biggest," Sarah replied. "My one shot." Eleanor reached for her daughter's hand. "You've always been stronger than you knew. Tomorrow they'll see it too." Sarah arrived at Donnelly Shipping at 5:45 a.m., determined to make a good first impression. The parking lot had more vehicles than yesterday, and the warehouse lights blazed through the early morning darkness. Inside, workers milled about, grabbing safety vests and equipment. Sarah approached the receptionist, who seemed marginally more awake than during their previous encounter. "I'm here for my trial day," Sarah explained. "Jason is supposed to be expecting me." The receptionist, her nameplate read Doris, handed Sarah a clipboard. "Sign these. When you're done, grab a yellow vest from that bin. Jason's by the loading dock." The forms were standard liability waivers. Sarah signed quickly and found a vest that fit over her t-shirt. Several workers glanced her way, their expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed amusement. She found Jason near a row of roll-up doors, barking orders at a team unloading a truck. "You actually showed up," he said when he spotted her, not bothering to hide his surprise. "I said I would." Sarah kept her voice neutral, professional. Jason handed her a pair of work gloves. "These might be too big, but they're all we've got. First rule here: if you can't lift it safely, don't lift it. Second rule: work doesn't stop because you're tired. Understood? We'll start you on sorting. Follow Carlos. He'll show you the system." Carlos turned out to be a man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes. Unlike Jason, he smiled when Sarah approached. "First day, eh?" He gestured for her to follow him to a conveyor belt. "Don't mind Jason. He's got something to prove to his uncle." Carlos explained the sorting system. Packages were classified by size, weight, and destination, then routed to different areas of the warehouse. Sarah's job was to check labels, lift packages onto the correct secondary conveyor, and keep the line moving. "Rhythm is key," Carlos demonstrated. "Read, lift, place. Read, lift, place. Don't rush. Don't slow down." For the first hour, Sarah maintained the pace. The smaller packages were manageable, but as the morning progressed, larger boxes appeared. Her arms began to burn, and sweat dampened her shirt despite the warehouse's chill. Around 9, Jason appeared, taking over for Carlos. "He's needed in receiving." Sarah nodded, focusing on the next package, a box marked heavy that required both arms to lift. "That's the wrong belt," Jason said as she placed it. "The label says Zone 3, Sarah replied, pointing to the marking. "New system started yesterday. Zone 3 heavy items go to Belt 4 now." Sarah adjusted, wondering if he was testing her or if the system had actually changed. Either way, she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of complaining. By lunch, every muscle ached. Sarah found a quiet corner in the break room and ate her sandwich while stretching her shoulders. She checked her phone. 3 texts from Maya and 1 from her mother, all wishing her luck. Carlos joined her. "Still standing, I see." Sarah managed to smile. "So far. Jason put you on sorting all morning." "It wasn't a question. That's usually a rotating position because it's harder than it looks. I noticed, Sarah admitted. After lunch, tell him you're ready for pallet building, Carlos advised. Don't ask, tell. He respects people who stand their ground. When the lunch whistle blew, Sarah found Jason reviewing inventory sheets. I'll be doing pallet building this afternoon, she said firmly. Jason looked up, surprised by her tone. That requires experience. Carlos can show me. I learn quickly. For a moment, Jason seemed ready to refuse. Then something shifted in his expression. Not quite respect, but perhaps a reassessment. Fine. Northeast section, aisle 7. Don't slow them down. Pallet building was more strategic than sorting. Arranging boxes on wooden platforms for shipping with heavier items on bottom, lighter on top, all secured with plastic wrap. It required planning and physical strength. Carlos demonstrated the technique, emphasizing proper lifting form. Legs, not back, he reminded her repeatedly. By mid-afternoon, Sarah had found her rhythm. Though slower than the experienced workers, she maintained steady progress. Her body ached, but Mr. Bennett's training had prepared her better than she'd expected. At 4, Frank appeared, observing without comment. Sarah continued working, pretending not to notice his evaluation. Near the end of shift, a rush order came in. Holiday decorations needed for an event the next day. The team scrambled to locate and prioritize the items. Need those boxes from the top shelf, Carlos said, pointing to storage above their heads. Jason approached with a ladder. I'll get them. Sarah spotted the box labels. Those are the light ones, right? Under 10 pounds each. Carlos nodded. Yeah, but they're awkward shapes. I can reach them from the platform lift, Sarah said. Might be faster than the ladder in this narrow aisle. Jason hesitated, then gestured toward the lift. Your call. Sarah operated the platform smoothly, efficiently retrieving the boxes while Jason and Carlos continued processing other items. When she finished, even Jason gave a reluctant nod. At 5:30, the shift ended. Sarah's muscles trembled with exhaustion, but she'd completed the day without complaint or failure. Frank found her as she returned her vest. Jason says you kept up. Coming from Jason, that was high praise. I did my best. Best is all we can ask. Frank handed her a form. Fill this out for payroll. We need bodies, and you've got one that shows up and works hard. Temporary position for now, 30 days. After that, we'll see. Sarah stared at the form, momentarily speechless. Problem? Frank asked. No, Sarah replied quickly. No problem at all. Thank you for the opportunity. As she drove home, exhaustion competed with elation. Her body hurt everywhere, but she'd done it, proven she could handle the physical demands that so many had assumed would defeat her. Her first real paycheck in months would arrive next week. Not enough to solve all their financial problems, but a start. Sarah's new routine began at 4:30 a.m. She'd rise in darkness, prepare Eleanor's medications and breakfast, then head to the community center where Mr. Bennett waited. How's the body holding up? He asked one morning, a week into her new job. Sarah rotated her shoulders. Better than I expected. The soreness is different now. More like I've done something worthwhile than like I'm falling apart. Mr. Bennett nodded approvingly. Your body's adapting. Now we need to refine your technique to prevent injury. He handed her a protein shake. And you need to feed those muscles properly. On my budget? Sarah raised an eyebrow. Nutrition doesn't have to be expensive. Mr. Bennett pulled out a notebook. I've made you a meal plan based on affordable foods that will support your strength development. Sarah scanned the lists of eggs, canned tuna, beans, frozen vegetables, and whole grains. This looks practical. It is. Nothing fancy, just functional, like our training. He tapped the notebook. Your body is a machine that needs the right fuel, especially now that you're asking more of it. After training, Sarah would shower at the community center, then head to work for her 6 a.m. shift. The warehouse was becoming familiar territory, its rhythms and systems making more sense each day. Frank had assigned her primarily to Carlos's team, where she learned various aspects of the operation. Carlos, it turned out, had worked at Donnelly's for over 20 years and knew every inch of the warehouse. "You're catching on quick," he told her as they built pallets for a large shipment. "Took my last trainee a month to figure out the zone system." "I made a study guide," Sarah admitted. "I review it every night." Carlos laughed. "Of course you do." During lunch breaks, Sarah often sat with Carlos and a few other workers who had gradually accepted her presence. She learned about their lives. Carlos had 4 grandchildren he was helping to raise. Diane was putting herself through nursing school. Miguel was saving for his daughter's college fund. Jason remained distant but had stopped giving her the most difficult assignments. Sarah considered this progress. In her 3rd week, Frank called her into his office. "How's it going?" he asked, shuffling through paperwork without looking up. "Good," Sarah replied. "I think I'm getting the hang of things. Carlos says you're one of the quickest learners he's had." Frank finally met her gaze. "I've got a situation. One of our inventory specialists is out on medical leave. We need someone detail-oriented to help with stock counts and organization." Sarah straightened. "I can do that. It involves both computer work and physical verification of stock. Means climbing ladders, squeezing through narrow spaces, lifting sample items." "Not a problem." Frank studied her for a moment. "Temporary assignment. 2 weeks. If you do well, it could become part of your regular duties. Comes with a small bump in pay." Sarah thought of the mounting medical bills at home. "When do I start?" "Tomorrow. Report to Margaret in inventory instead of your usual station." Margaret turned out to be a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who ran the inventory department with military precision. "Your job," she explained, leading Sarah through rows of shelving, "is to verify that what's in our system matches what's actually on our shelves. Discrepancies cost us time and money." The work was detail-oriented and physically demanding in a different way than Sarah's usual duties. It required concentration, accuracy, and constant movement throughout the warehouse. By the end of her first inventory day, Sarah's mind was as tired as her body. But there was satisfaction in the rows of neatly checked data, in the problems identified and corrected. When her first paycheck arrived, Sarah stared at the figure in disbelief. It wasn't wealth by any standard, but it was more than she'd earned in months. She immediately made a payment on their rent arrears and bought a month's worth of Eleanor's medications. "Look at you," Maya said when Sarah stopped by the cafe after work. "Warehouse woman." Sarah flexed her arm, showing off a developing muscle. "Who knew rejection could be so motivating? I still can't believe you're voluntarily doing this physically demanding job when you could. What, take a desk job that doesn't exist? Keep getting rejected for customer service roles?" Sarah shook her head. "This is working, Maya. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm moving forward instead of drowning." "And your body? Those warehouse jobs are brutal." Actually, Sarah pulled out Mr. Bennett's nutrition journal, now filled with her notes and observations. "I'm getting stronger every day, and not just physically." That evening, as Sarah prepared dinner, Eleanor watched her from the kitchen table. "You're different," her mother observed. "Standing taller." Sarah stirred the pot of stew, a protein-rich recipe from Mr. Bennett's plan. "I'm tired all the time. My hands have calluses and everything aches. But it's a good tired." "Your father would be proud," Eleanor said softly. "He always said the Ellis family was built for endurance." "I think he was right." Sarah placed a bowl in front of her mother. "We've got 2 months of rent paid up now, and I've ordered all your medications for next month. Things are looking up." After dinner, Sarah went through her nightly routine, reviewing warehouse procedures, stretching her tired muscles, preparing for the next day. As she set her multiple alarms, her phone buzzed with a text from Frank. Inventory audit results excellent. Margaret impressed. Continue assignment through end of month. Sarah smiled. Small victories were still victories, and they were beginning to add up. 1 month into her employment at Donnelly Shipping, Sarah stood before the mirror in the community center locker room, studying her reflection. The changes weren't dramatic. She hadn't magically transformed into a different person, but they were noticeable to her trained eye. Her posture had improved, her arms showed definition, and there was a firmness to her body that hadn't been there before. Mr. Bennett appeared in the doorway. Physical assessment day. You ready? Sarah nodded, tucking her progress chart into her gym bag. The chart tracked her lifting capacity, endurance, and other metrics, all showing steady improvement over the past month. This is the benchmark that matters, Mr. Bennett said as they walked to the weight room. Temporary positions at Donnelly become permanent after passing their physical assessment. 30-day mark. Right? Right? Sarah took a deep breath. Frank hasn't mentioned it, but Carlos says it's standard procedure. The assessment was comprehensive, lifting tests, endurance challenges, and skill demonstrations tailored to warehouse operations. Mr. Bennett had designed their training specifically for this, and Sarah completed each task with growing confidence. Well? She asked when they finished. Mr. Bennett consulted his clipboard, his expression deliberately neutral. 4 weeks ago, your maximum safe lift was 48 pounds. Today, it's 73. Your endurance has increased by 32%. Your recovery time between exertions has decreased by almost half. A smile broke across his weathered face. In technical terms, you're kicking ass. Sarah laughed, the tension releasing. So I'll pass their assessment? You'll ace it, Mr. Bennett assured her. The question is whether they're smart enough to recognize what they've got. At the warehouse that afternoon, a sense of unease permeated the air. Workers huddled in small groups, conversations hushed. What's going on? Sarah asked Carlos as they checked inventory in the East Wing. Carlos glanced around before answering. Rumor has it Mercer Industries made another offer to buy us out. A big one this time. Sarah's stomach tightened. Would Frank sell? He's always refused before, but... Carlos shrugged. Business hasn't been great. Our equipment is outdated, and competing with Mercer's technology is getting harder. What happens if he sells? Corporate restructuring. Carlos's expression darkened. That's fancy talk for layoffs. Mercer would keep the highest performers and longest tenured employees. Everyone else. He made a cutting motion across his throat. The news cast a shadow over Sarah's day. If Donnelly sold to Mercer Industries, to Victor Mercer, who had already rejected her multiple times, her job security would evaporate regardless of her performance. After lunch, Frank called a staff meeting. The warehouse employees gathered in the shipping area, anxiety visible on most faces. I know there are rumors, Frank began without preamble. Yes, Mercer Industries has made an offer. No, I haven't decided whether to accept it. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This business was my father's before it was mine, Frank continued. We've survived recessions, technological changes, and competitors trying to put us out of business. But I won't lie to you, we're facing challenges. Our equipment needs upgrading, and our processes could be more efficient. He surveyed the assembled workers. I've scheduled a formal assessment for all employees next week. This isn't about looking for people to cut. It's about documenting our strengths so I can negotiate from a position of power whatever I decide. As the meeting dispersed, Jason approached Sarah. Your 30-day assessment is part of this evaluation. I'll be conducting it. Sarah kept her expression neutral. When? Tomorrow, end of shift. Jason's tone was professional but cold. Standard procedure, lifting tests, endurance challenges, knowledge assessment. Sarah nodded. I'll be ready. That evening, She reviewed her progress chart once more, mentally preparing for each component of the assessment. Her temporary status weighed heavily, especially with the uncertainty of Donnelly's future. The next day passed in a blur of normal duties. Sarah focused on her work, refusing to let anxiety affect her performance. As the end of shift approached, Jason found her in the inventory section. "Ready?" he asked. Sarah squared her shoulders. "Ready." The assessment began with knowledge questions about warehouse procedures, safety protocols, and inventory systems. Sarah answered confidently, drawing on her nightly study sessions. Next came the physical portion. Jason led her to the training area where new hires learned proper lifting techniques. A series of boxes were arranged by weight, from 20 to 80 pounds. Standard procedure is to lift each weight safely, demonstrating proper form, Jason explained, his tone mechanical. "You stop when you reach your limit." Sarah proceeded methodically through the weights, applying the techniques Mr. Bennett had drilled into her. 20, 30, 40 pounds, easily managed. 50, 60, requiring more concentration but still within her capability. At 70 pounds, she took an extra moment to position herself correctly, aware of Jason watching critically. The box rose smoothly as she executed the lift with textbook form. The 75-pound box presented her first real challenge. Sarah focused on her breathing, engaged her core, and lifted cleanly, steadily. When she reached for the 80-pound box, Jason stepped forward. "That's the heaviest we test for. Not many make it this far." Something in his tone, a challenge perhaps, spurred Sarah on. She positioned herself, gripped the handles, and lifted. For a moment, the weight seemed immovable. Then, drawing on weeks of training, she raised the box to waist height, held it for the required count, and set it down with control. Jason made a note on his clipboard, his expression unreadable. "The endurance test is next. 5 minutes of continuous movement between stations, simulating a busy shift." Sarah completed the circuit, moving boxes of various weights between shelving units. Though her muscles burned, her training with Mr. Bennett had prepared her well. When the timer buzzed, Jason checked his stopwatch and made final notes. "I'll submit this to Frank. He'll let you know the results." "Jason," Sarah said before he could leave, "I know you didn't think I belonged here. Has that assessment changed your mind?" For a long moment, Jason studied her, conflict evident in his expression. Finally, he said, "You're stronger than I expected, but this job is about more than strength." "I know," Sarah replied evenly. "It's about consistency, reliability, and determination. I've demonstrated all three." Jason nodded once, a gesture not quite of respect but of acknowledgement. "We'll see what Frank decides." The Employee of the Month certificate looked almost out of place on Frank's utilitarian office wall. Sarah stared at her name printed in bold letters, still processing his words. "Permanent position," Frank repeated, sliding the paperwork across his desk. "Based on your assessment results and performance evaluation, we're offering you a full-time role. Benefits kick in after 90 days. Sarah scanned the document, hourly rate, job description, expectations. The pay was better than she'd anticipated. "Your assessment was impressive," Frank continued. "Jason said your lifting technique was textbook perfect." "I've been training specifically for this," Sarah admitted. Frank nodded. "It shows. Most new hires struggle with the physical demands, but you've adapted quickly. Margaret says your inventory work is exceptional too, detail-oriented, efficient." Sarah signed the papers, a weight lifting from her shoulders. Permanent employment meant stability, health insurance eventually, a steady income. "Thank you for the opportunity," she said, meaning it. "Thank yourself. You earned it." Frank took the signed forms. "Now, about the Employee of the Month. It comes with a parking spot near the entrance and a gift card to Cornerstone Cafe." Sarah smiled at the mention of Maya's Cafe. "That's my friend's place." Small world, Frank chuckled. The recognition will be announced at tomorrow's morning meeting. Just a heads up. As Sarah left Frank's office, the reality of her achievement sank in. 2 months ago, she couldn't get warehouses to consider her application. Now, she was being recognized for excellence in the very job others thought she couldn't handle. The next morning, Frank's announcement received mixed reactions. Most workers applauded politely, some offered genuine congratulations, but a few, Jason among them, exchanged glances that spoke volumes. "Don't let it bother you," Carlos said later as they worked side by side. "Some people here think seniority should determine everything." "Including Employee of the Month?" Sarah asked. "Especially that." Carlos aligned boxes on a pallet. "Jason believes he's overdue for recognition. Now his uncle gives it to the new hire instead." "Great," Sarah sighed. "More reason for him to resent me. He'll get over it. Or he won't." Carlos shrugged. "Either way, you earned it." Over the next week, Sarah settled into her new status as a permanent employee. The security allowed her to plan beyond immediate survival. She started a small emergency fund and scheduled some overdue maintenance for her car. Eleanor's health had stabilized with consistent medication, and the threat of eviction had disappeared. Things were looking up. Then the anonymous complaint appeared on the HR bulletin board. Sarah discovered it during her lunch break. A printed note claiming the Employee of the Month selection was based on favoritism rather than merit, and questioning whether physical requirements were being selectively waived. Though no names were mentioned, the implication was clear. "Ignore it," Carlos advised when Sarah showed him. "Cowards use anonymous notes because they have no real case." But the damage was done. Whispers followed Sarah through the warehouse, and some colleagues became noticeably distant. After work, Sarah found Jason in the parking lot. "If you have a problem with me, say it to my face." Jason looked genuinely confused. "What are you talking about?" "The complaint. About favoritism and waived requirements." Understanding dawned in his expression. "That wasn't me." "Really? Because you're the one who conducted my assessment, and you're Frank's nephew, and you've made it clear from day one that you don't think I belong here." "I don't need anonymous notes," Jason replied, his voice low. "If I have a problem, I address it directly." Something in his tone made Sarah pause. "Then who? Does it matter? Every workplace has politics." Jason unlocked his truck. "For what it's worth, your assessment results were legitimate. I reported exactly what I observed." The conversation left Sarah unsettled. If not Jason, who had it out for her? The answer came 2 days later when Sarah overheard a conversation in the break room. A group of workers were discussing the upcoming Mercer Industries evaluation. "They'll clean house if they buy us," one said. "Anyone without seniority is first to go." "Unless you've got special recognition," another replied bitterly. "Like Employee of the Month." Sarah recognized the voice, Dave from shipping, who had applied for the inventory position she now partially occupied. The politics suddenly made sense. Her recognition wasn't just about her performance. It was perceived as potential protection in case of corporate takeover. That evening, Sarah discussed the situation with Mr. Bennett during their training session. "Workplace politics are universal," he said as she completed a set of deadlifts. "Especially when people feel threatened." "I just want to do my job," Sarah grunted, raising the barbell. "And you're doing it well. That's threatening to those who coast on seniority rather than performance." Mr. Bennett added weight to the bar. "This is your new baseline, by the way. 85 pounds. Sarah repositioned herself for another lift. "What do I do about the resentment?" "Keep exceeding expectations. Document your achievements. Build alliances with respected old-timers like Carlos." Mr. Bennett watched her form carefully. "And prepare for the next challenge, because there's always a next challenge." On her way home, Sarah stopped at Cornerstone Cafe. Maya was in the kitchen, experimenting with a new scone recipe. Employee of the month, huh? Maya grinned, sliding a sample across the counter. Guess I can't call you unemployed bum anymore. Sarah laughed. Guess not. Though not everyone at work is celebrating with me. Haters gonna hate, Maya said sagely. You know what's better than proving people wrong? Continuing to prove yourself right. Sarah considered this as she drove home. The Employee of the Month certificate represented more than recognition. It was tangible proof that she belonged in a world that had tried to exclude her. No anonymous complaint could take that away. The anonymous complaint letter disappeared from the bulletin board, but its impact lingered. Sarah noticed the divide growing among warehouse staff, those who supported her and those who viewed her as a threat to the established order. Margaret from inventory became an unexpected ally, defending Sarah's work when others questioned it. Results speak for themselves, she told a group of skeptics during a morning meeting. Our inventory accuracy has improved 12% since Sarah joined the team. The data-driven support helped, but tensions remained. Sarah focused on her work, determined to let performance answer her critics. Then human resources called her in. Doris, who doubled as receptionist and HR manager, looked uncomfortable as Sarah took a seat in her small office. We've received some concerns about your ability to meet the physical requirements of your position. Sarah kept her expression neutral. My assessment results are on file. I exceeded all requirements. Yes, but Doris fidgeted with a folder. Some have suggested the assessment was modified to accommodate you. Who made these accusations? Sarah asked, though she could guess. Complaints are confidential. Doris seemed relieved to hide behind protocol. But Frank needs to address them formally. There's a meeting scheduled with him tomorrow morning. Sarah nodded, keeping her composure until she left the office. In the bathroom, she splashed cold water on her face, fighting the familiar feeling of being judged for her appearance rather than her abilities. That evening, she called Maya. They're trying to push you out, Maya said bluntly after hearing the situation. Classic workplace bullying. But why? I'm doing the job. I've proven I can handle it. Because you're changing their narrative, Maya replied. You're not fitting the stereotype, and that makes people uncomfortable. Plus, with this Mercer acquisition looming, everyone's trying to secure their position. After they hung up, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, making notes for tomorrow's meeting. She listed her accomplishments, her assessment results, and specific examples of her contributions. Eleanor wheeled herself into the kitchen. Trouble at work? Sarah hesitated, then explained the situation. Eleanor's expression hardened. You know, I faced something similar when I started at the accounting firm. The old guard didn't think a woman belonged in their department. What did you do? Documented everything. Kept records of my work, my hours, my contributions. Eleanor's eyes flashed with old determination. When they claimed I wasn't meeting standards, I had evidence proving otherwise. That's basically what I'm doing now, Sarah said, gesturing to her notes. Good. Don't let them rewrite reality. Eleanor reached for her daughter's hand. And remember, this isn't about your size. It's about their insecurity. The next morning, Sarah arrived early for the meeting with Frank. To her surprise, Jason was already there. Jason requested to attend, Frank explained as they settled in his office. Since he conducted your assessment. Sarah nodded cautiously, unsure whose side Jason was on. Frank got straight to the point. HR received complaints suggesting your physical assessment was adjusted to ensure you passed. That's not true, Sarah stated firmly. I know, Frank replied, surprising her. I've reviewed the documentation. Your results are clearly recorded and verified. Jason spoke up. I conducted the assessment by the book. No modifications, no special treatment. Sarah lifted the weights, completed the endurance tests, and demonstrated the required knowledge. Frank nodded. The complaint also implied that your current duties have been altered to accommodate physical limitations. I've taken on additional responsibilities, not fewer, Sarah pointed out. My inventory role requires more movement throughout the warehouse, not less. Again, the records support your statement. Frank closed the folder. I wanted you both here to clarify that these accusations have been investigated and dismissed. Relief washed over Sarah. Thank you. Don't thank me for doing my job, Frank said. But understand this situation reflects the uncertainty everyone's feeling with Mercer circling. People are looking for advantages or scapegoats. After the meeting, Sarah stopped Jason in the hallway. Thank you for backing me up in there. Jason looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. I just stated facts. Your assessment was legitimate. Still, you could have stayed out of it. No, I couldn't. Something resembling integrity flashed in his eyes. I don't have to like you to be honest about your performance. As Jason walked away, Sarah realized their relationship had evolved from antagonism to something approaching professional respect. Not friendship, but recognition of capability. Back at her workstation, Carlos was waiting. How'd it go? The complaints were dismissed, Sarah told him. Frank reviewed the evidence and closed the matter. Good. But watch your back, Carlos warned. The Mercer evaluation team arrives next week. Word is they're sending efficiency experts to observe our operations. Will they be interviewing staff? Eventually, if the sale moves forward, they'll want to know who's worth keeping. The news added urgency to Sarah's work. If Mercer Industries bought Donnelly Shipping, she would face Victor Mercer again, the man who had laughed at her application. This time, however, she would have a record of accomplishment. That afternoon, Dave from shipping made a point of bumping into her in a narrow aisle, then muttering an insincere apology. The message was clear. The HR complaint might have been dismissed, but the resentment remained. Rather than confrontation, Sarah chose documentation. She began keeping a detailed log of her daily accomplishments, efficiency improvements, and problem-solving contributions. If Mercer's team came looking for evidence of her value, she would be ready. Eleanor noticed the change in Sarah's approach when she spread her documentation across the kitchen table that evening. Building your case? Her mother asked. Sarah nodded. If Mercer buys the company, I need to be undeniable. That's my girl. Eleanor smiled. Show them exactly what they'd be losing if they let you go. The warehouse atmosphere grew tense as the arrival of Mercer's evaluation team approached. Workers who normally took leisurely breaks were suddenly vigilant about time. Equipment was cleaned, aisles were organized, and a fresh coat of paint appeared on the loading dock doors. Like putting lipstick on a pig, Carlos commented as they worked in the inventory section. They'll still see our outdated systems. The rumor mill churned constantly. Some claimed Frank had already accepted Mercer's offer. Others insisted he was using the evaluation to leverage a better deal from a different buyer. No one knew the truth except Frank, who remained tight-lipped. On Monday morning, Frank called an all-staff meeting before the shift began. Mercer Industries representatives will be here all week, he announced to the assembled workers. They'll observe operations, review processes, and evaluate efficiency. This is not yet a done deal, but it is a serious evaluation. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Be professional, do your jobs as usual, and direct any questions they have to your department managers. Frank's expression was unreadable. One more thing. If this sale proceeds, all employees will need to reapply for their positions. The last statement landed like a bomb. Reapplying meant no guarantees, no security, regardless of seniority or performance. That's corporate restructuring for you, Carlos whispered to Sarah. They'll keep some of us, discard others, and bring in their own people for key positions. All day, workers spotted Mercer representatives in their pressed shirts and clipboards, watching, taking notes, occasionally asking questions. They traveled in pairs, one observing operations while the other documented findings. Near the end of shift, Sarah was counting inventory in the northeast corner when a familiar voice froze her in place. Throughput in this section seems slower than industry standard. Victor Mercer. His voice was unmistakable, the same dismissive tone that had rejected her application months ago. Sarah kept her head down, checking stock on a lower shelf as footsteps approached. She could see polished shoes stop a few feet away. "This area specializes in irregular-sized items," Margaret replied, her voice professionally neutral. "Standard metrics don't apply directly. Everything can be optimized," Mercer responded. "Who handles this section primarily?" "Sarah Ellis. She's improved accuracy by 14% since taking over." Sarah held her breath, waiting for recognition. When none came, she slowly stood, clipboard in hand. Victor Mercer's eyes passed over her without a flicker of recognition. We'll need to see her productivity numbers compared to industry benchmarks." After they moved on, Margaret approached Sarah. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "In a way, I have." Sarah explained her history with Mercer, including the rejection that had started her journey. Margaret's eyebrows rose. "Well, he clearly didn't remember you." "That's almost worse," Sarah admitted. "I was so devastated by his rejection, and he probably rejected dozens of people that day without a second thought." That evening, Sarah discussed the encounter with Mr. Bennett during their training session. "Perfect opportunity," he said as she completed a set of overhead presses. "Now you can demonstrate your value directly to the man who dismissed you. If he even notices, make him notice, not by confronting him, but by being undeniably good at your job." Mr. Bennett adjusted the weights. 90 pounds today. Your strength is still increasing steadily." The next day, Frank informed the staff that Robert Mercer, Victor's son and the company's chief operations officer, would be interviewing select employees. "They've chosen representatives from each department," Frank explained. "Sarah, you'll represent inventory." Sarah's surprise must have shown on her face. "Margaret recommended you," Frank added. "Said you know the systems better than most veterans." The interview was scheduled for Thursday. Sarah spent every spare moment preparing, reviewing inventory procedures, studying efficiency metrics, and practicing responses to potential questions. When Thursday arrived, Sarah dressed in her most professional attire: black pants, a navy button-down shirt, and the one blazer she owned that still fit properly. The interview would take place in Frank's office, which had been temporarily surrendered to the Mercer team. Robert Mercer looked like a younger, fitter version of his father. He greeted Sarah with practiced corporate courtesy, gesturing to a chair across from Frank's desk. "Ms. Ellis, your inventory management metrics are impressive," he began, consulting a tablet, "particularly given your relatively short tenure." "Thank you," Sarah replied, surprised by the positive opening. "Walk me through your approach to the Northeast Quadrant reorganization." That project improved pick efficiency by 17%. For the next 30 minutes, Sarah explained her methods, the problems she'd identified, and the solutions she'd implemented. Robert asked insightful questions that demonstrated actual interest rather than perfunctory evaluation. "Your background isn't in logistics," he noted, reviewing her file. "How did you develop these skills so quickly?" "I'm detail-oriented by nature," Sarah replied, "and I studied the systems extensively, both during and after work hours." Robert nodded approvingly. "Initiative. Good." He made notes on his tablet. "One last question. If Mercer acquires Donnelly, what position would you see yourself in?" The question was an opportunity Sarah hadn't expected. "Honestly, I'd be interested in inventory optimization across multiple facilities. I've identified patterns here that likely exist throughout regional warehouses." "Ambitious," Robert commented, but his tone suggested approval rather than criticism. As the interview concluded, the office door opened, and Victor Mercer entered. "Robert, we need..." He stopped abruptly, his eyes finally focusing on Sarah. Recognition dawned slowly. "Have we met?" "Yes, sir," Sarah replied evenly. "I applied at Meridian Shipping several times over the past year." Victor frowned slightly, searching his memory. "The loading dock position?" "Among others." An awkward silence filled the room. Robert glanced between them, sensing the tension. "Well," Victor finally said, "it appears Donnelly was more accommodating in their hiring practices." The implication was clear, but Sarah refused to be diminished. Donnelly recognized potential where others saw only limitations. Their investment has paid off in measurable improvements to their operations. Victor's expression hardened, but Robert intervened smoothly. "We were just finishing up, Father. Ms. Ellis has provided valuable insights into the inventory systems here." As Sarah left the office, she heard Victor's lowered voice. "We need to discuss their hiring standards before making any decisions." The comment stung, but Sarah walked tall through the warehouse. She had faced Victor Mercer again, not as a desperate job applicant, but as a valued employee with proven contributions. Whether it would be enough remained to be seen. The email from Mercer Industries arrived exactly 1 week after the evaluation team departed. Sarah stared at her phone screen, the formal rejection phrased in corporate platitudes. "After careful consideration of all applicants, we regret to inform you that we will not be moving forward with your application for continued employment at this time. While we appreciate your contributions to Donnelly Shipping, we have determined that your qualifications do not align with our organizational needs moving forward." The message concluded with empty wishes for success in future endeavors, signed by Mercer's HR department. No personal touch, no specific explanation. Sarah's hands trembled as she set down her phone. The email had arrived during her lunch break, and she still had 4 hours left in her shift. 4 hours of working in a place that had already decided she had no future there. Carlos found her in the break room, her untouched sandwich sitting before her. "You too?" Sarah nodded. "You got rejected?" "Just now." Carlos sighed heavily. 23 years, and they dismissed me with a form email. "I'm sorry, Carlos." "Not your fault." He sat across from her. Half the warehouse got the same message. Mostly people without specialized skills or management connections. Sarah thought of Jason, Frank's nephew. "Let me guess who's staying." Jason, of course. Dave from shipping. Margaret from inventory. Carlos counted on his fingers. Basically anyone with family ties or who kissed up to the evaluation team. "Margaret recommended me for that interview," Sarah said. "She must have known it wouldn't matter." "Politics." Carlos shrugged. "Nothing personal, just corporate calculus." But it felt personal, especially knowing Victor Mercer was behind the decision. Frank called an emergency meeting at the end of shift. He looked older than he had a week ago, the lines in his face deeper. "I know many of you received notices today," he began, his voice heavy. "I want to clarify that these decisions came from Mercer Industries, not from me. The sale agreement gives them full authority over staffing decisions." Cold comfort, Sarah thought. "Those who received notices will have 2 weeks of employment remaining," Frank continued. "I've negotiated a small severance package for everyone affected. It's not much, but it's something." As the meeting dispersed, Sarah approached Frank. "I'd like to understand why I wasn't retained. My metrics were strong, and I've consistently improved department efficiency." Frank looked uncomfortable. "Personnel decisions were made at Mercer's corporate level. I wasn't consulted. So Victor Mercer personally rejected me. Again." Frank didn't deny it. "Look, Sarah, you're a good worker. I'd write you a strong recommendation for any other position." "Thank you," Sarah replied automatically, though recommendations hadn't helped her before. At home, Sarah broke the news to Eleanor, trying to sound more optimistic than she felt. 2 more weeks of pay, plus severance. I'll start applying elsewhere immediately." Eleanor studied her daughter's face. This feels familiar. Too familiar, Sarah agreed. But I'm not the same person I was when this journey started. I'm stronger now. I have experience, references, and you have me, believing in you every step of the way. Eleanor squeezed her hand. This is a setback, not an ending. The next day, Sarah threw herself into her work with grim determination. If these were her final weeks at Donnelly, she would leave knowing she'd given her best. Maya was furious when Sarah told her the news that evening. That's discrimination. You should sue them. On what grounds? Sarah asked tiredly. They didn't say, we're firing you because you're fat. They just decided I don't align with their organizational needs. It's still wrong, Maya insisted. After everything you've proven. Sarah couldn't argue with that. The rejection stung precisely because she had proven herself capable, had exceeded expectations, had earned recognition, and none of it had mattered in the end. In her remaining days, Sarah noticed changes accelerating around the warehouse. New Mercer-branded equipment arrived daily. Corporate representatives conducted training sessions for retained staff. The Donnelly name was already being phased out on paperwork and signage. Then, 3 days before her employment ended, disaster struck. Sarah was in the inventory section when she heard a tremendous crash from the loading area, followed by shouts and the blare of an emergency alarm. She rushed toward the commotion along with everyone else. The central conveyor system, the heart of the warehouse operation, had catastrophically failed. A critical support beam had collapsed, causing a chain reaction that damaged sorting mechanisms, crushed packages, and blocked the main distribution channel. No packages could move in or out. Frank and Jason were already assessing the damage, their expressions grim. Mercer representatives hovered nearby, talking urgently into phones. This couldn't have happened at a worse time, Carlos murmured to Sarah. Holiday shipping season starts next week. Robert Mercer arrived within the hour, surveying the destruction with barely contained anger. How long to repair this? The equipment is specialized, Frank explained. Ordering replacement parts alone could take 2 weeks. Installation, testing, we're looking at a month minimum. Unacceptable, Robert snapped. We have contracts to fulfill. Clients expecting holiday deliveries. We could divert packages to the Meridian facility, someone suggested. They're already at capacity, Victor Mercer said, appearing behind his son. This is precisely why I questioned the wisdom of acquiring this outdated operation. As recriminations flew, Sarah studied the damaged system. During her inventory work, she had become intimately familiar with every part of the warehouse, including the conveyor system. The maintenance manuals were part of her documentation project. She turned to Carlos. The primary damage is to the central hub and sorting mechanism. The conveyor belts themselves are mostly intact. So with the right bypass configuration and manual sorting stations, we could get a modified system running. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. It wouldn't be as efficient as the automated system, but it could handle the volume until proper repairs are made. Carlos looked skeptical. That would require completely reconfiguring the workflow. I know. Sarah watched the Mercer representatives arguing with Frank and Jason, none of them offering actual solutions. But it's better than shutting down completely for a month during peak season. As she turned to walk away, Carlos caught her arm. Where are you going? Aren't you going to tell them your idea? Sarah glanced at Victor Mercer, the man who had rejected her twice and was now overseeing her third rejection. Why would they listen to me? I don't align with their organizational needs. Remember, Sarah spent the evening researching conveyor system bypasses and manual sorting configurations. Though she had no engineering degree, she understood flow patterns and efficiency from her inventory work. By midnight, she had sketched a workable alternative system using existing warehouse components. You should be sleeping, Eleanor commented from her wheelchair in the doorway, especially if you're job hunting tomorrow. I can't stop thinking about the warehouse problem, Sarah admitted. I know how to fix it, at least temporarily. Eleanor studied her daughter's diagrams. Then tell them. Why should I help the company that's firing me? Because you're not doing it for Mercer, Eleanor replied. You're doing it for Carlos and the others who still need those jobs. For the small businesses counting on holiday deliveries. For yourself, to prove one final time what you're capable of. Sarah considered her mother's words as she fell into restless sleep. By morning, she had made her decision. At the warehouse, chaos reigned. Executives from Mercer Industries had flown in overnight. Emergency repair teams assessed the damage while managers huddled in tense groups, discussing alternatives and calculating losses. Sarah found Robert Mercer in Frank's office, surrounded by blueprints and maintenance reports. "Excuse me," she said from the doorway. "I have a potential solution." Robert looked up, recognition dawning. "Ms. Ellis, right? From inventory." "Yes. I've developed a bypass configuration that could get a modified system running within 48 hours. Interest flickered across his face. "Come in." Sarah spread her diagrams across the desk, explaining her concept. "The main sorting hub is damaged beyond quick repair, but we can create a manual sorting station here," she pointed, "and reroute these conveyor sections to bypass the damaged area. It would require more manual labor but could handle about 70% of normal volume." Robert studied the diagrams with growing interest. This could actually work. He turned to an engineer beside him. "Johnson, what do you think?" The engineer examined Sarah's sketches. "The bypass concept is sound. We'd need to fabricate some transition components, but that's faster than waiting for replacement parts." "How did you come up with this?" Robert asked Sarah. "I've been documenting the entire warehouse system for months," she explained, "including maintenance manuals and contingency plans. The documentation project no one supported," Frank added from the doorway, having overheard the conversation. Robert looked between them. "We need this operational as soon as possible. Ms. Ellis, would you be willing to consult on implementation?" "As a contractor," he added, acknowledging her impending termination. Before Sarah could answer, Victor Mercer entered the office. His expression darkened when he spotted her. "What's this?" "Sarah has developed a viable workaround for the conveyor system," Robert explained, showing his father the diagrams. "We could be operational within days instead of weeks." Victor barely glanced at the plans. "We have engineers for this sort of thing, none of whom have proposed a workable solution," Robert countered. "This addresses our immediate needs while we arrange proper repairs." Victor's jaw tightened. "Fine. Let the engineers review it." He turned to Sarah. "Thank you for your input, Ms. Ellis. We'll take it from here." The dismissal was clear. Sarah gathered her diagrams, but Robert stopped her. "Leave those, please, and your contact information." His expression conveyed an apology for his father's behavior. "We may need to consult you on implementation details." As Sarah left the office, she heard Victor's lowered voice. "We don't need to bring terminated employees back as consultants. It sends the wrong message." The rest of the day passed in uncertainty. Sarah continued her regular duties while watching engineers and managers study her bypass plans. No one approached her for input. After her shift ended, Sarah cleaned out her locker, assuming her idea had been dismissed along with her employment. As she walked through the parking lot, a voice called her name. "Sarah, wait up." Jason jogged toward her, looking uncharacteristically flustered. "Robert Mercer wants to see you." Sarah hesitated. "My shift's over. It's about your conveyor bypass plan. They're moving forward with it." Surprise and satisfaction mingled as Sarah followed Jason back inside. Robert waited in the conference room with several engineers and Frank. "Ms. Ellis," Robert began, "we've thoroughly vetted your proposal and believe it's our best immediate option. However, implementation will be complex given your intimate knowledge of the systems. What are you asking? We'd like to bring you on as a special project contractor to oversee implementation, Robert said. 2 weeks, premium consultant rate. Sarah considered the offer. The money would be welcome, but this wasn't about financial compensation. This was about recognition. I'll do it, she said, on one condition. I select my implementation team. Robert raised an eyebrow. That's unusual. This is an unusual situation. I need people who understand the warehouse operations, not just engineering principles. After a moment's consideration, Robert nodded. Within reason. Who did you have in mind? Carlos Rodriguez, Sarah said immediately, and anyone else from the terminated group with relevant experience. They know this warehouse better than any outsiders. Frank smiled slightly, the first genuine smile Sarah had seen from him in days. Agreed, Robert said. You'll report directly to me starting tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. As the meeting concluded, Sarah overheard Frank speaking quietly to Robert. You're making the right call. She sees solutions where others see only problems. Outside, Carlos waited by Sarah's car. Jason told me, project contractor. And you're on my team, Sarah grinned. If you want to be. Wouldn't miss it. Carlos shook his head in amazement. You know Victor will hate this arrangement. Probably, Sarah admitted. But right now they need me more than I need them. And I plan to make the most of it. For the first time since receiving her termination notice, Sarah felt a surge of genuine hope. Not just for temporary employment, but for the chance to demonstrate her value so conclusively that even Victor Mercer couldn't deny it. Sarah arrived at the warehouse at 5:30 a.m., her emergency repair plan neatly organized in a binder. She had spent most of the night refining details, considering contingencies, and preparing implementation steps. This was her moment to shine, and she intended to be thoroughly prepared. The warehouse buzzed with unusual activity despite the early hour. Engineers consulted blueprints, maintenance crews cleared debris from the damaged area, and Mercer executives paced anxiously, checking watches and making calls. Robert Mercer spotted Sarah and waved her over to a makeshift command center, a cluster of folding tables near the damaged conveyor system. You're early, he noted with approval. Your team is assembling. I've authorized emergency overtime for anyone you need. Sarah nodded, surveying the damage in daylight. The destruction was substantial but focused mainly on the central sorting hub. Her bypass plan would route packages around this section through a series of manual sorting stations. I'll need welding equipment, sheet metal, roller sections from storage, and at least 12 workers for the initial setup, Sarah began, consulting her notes. Whatever you need, Robert assured her. The financial impact of extended downtime far exceeds any implementation costs. Sarah began assembling her team. Carlos arrived first, followed by several other workers who had received termination notices, people with specialized knowledge of the warehouse systems who had been deemed replaceable by Mercer Industries. Ironic, isn't it? Carlos murmured as they gathered. They fire us, then need us to save them. Let's focus on solutions, not satisfaction, Sarah replied, though she couldn't help feeling a touch of vindication. She divided the team into specialized units. One group would construct the bypass sections, another would establish manual sorting stations, and a third would reconfigure the operational conveyor segments. Sarah moved between groups, coordinating efforts and solving problems as they arose. By mid-morning, the basic framework of her plan was taking physical shape. Sections of conveyor belt were being rerouted, temporary platforms constructed for sorting stations, and new workflow patterns established. Frank observed from the periphery, occasionally offering suggestions based on his decades of experience. You're doing what I always knew you could, he told Sarah during a brief break, proving your worth beyond question. As the day progressed, news crews arrived outside the warehouse. The potential impact of a month-long shipping outage during the holiday season had made local headlines. Mercer's PR team kept reporters at bay, promising updates once a solution was implemented. Around noon, Victor Mercer appeared, surveying the progress with a critical eye. He approached Robert, deliberately turning his back to Sarah, who stood nearby. "This looks chaotic," Victor observed. "Are we sure this improvisation will actually work?" "The engineers have verified the concept," Robert replied, "and implementation is proceeding on schedule." Victor glanced briefly at Sarah, his expression unreadable. "And our consultant is managing adequately?" The dismissive tone wasn't lost on anyone within earshot. Sarah continued her work, refusing to be baited into a response. Robert, however, was less restrained. "Ms. Ellis isn't just managing, she's excelling. This entire concept emerged from her understanding of our systems. Without her, we'd be looking at millions in losses and damaged client relationships." Victor's jaw tightened, but he offered no further comment before departing. By evening, nearly 60% of the bypass system was in place. The team had worked tirelessly, fueled by determination and, for those who had been terminated, a desire to prove their value one final time. "We should break for the night," Sarah announced around 8 p.m. "Everyone's exhausted, and fatigue leads to mistakes. We'll resume at 6 tomorrow." As the team dispersed, Robert approached Sarah. "Impressive progress. Your people work well together." "They're motivated," Sarah replied, "and they know this system intimately." "I've been reviewing their personnel files," Robert said carefully. "There seems to have been some inconsistency in the retention decisions." Sarah met his gaze directly. "You mean qualified people were let go while others were kept based on factors other than merit?" "I didn't say that," Robert responded, though his expression suggested agreement. "But I am reconsidering some staffing decisions in light of what I've observed today." This was unexpected. Sarah had hoped to prove her own worth, not necessarily champion her entire team. Yet here was an opportunity to potentially help others as well. "The people working this project aren't just physically capable," Sarah said. "They have institutional knowledge that can't be replaced quickly. Carlos has been here 23 years. Miguel knows every quirk of the electrical systems. Diane developed half the inventory protocols." Robert nodded thoughtfully. "I'll take that under advisement." That night, Sarah arrived home exhausted but energized. Eleanor waited up, eager for news. "It's working," Sarah told her mother. "My plan is actually coming together." "Of course it is," Eleanor replied confidently. "You've always seen possibilities others miss. And Robert Mercer is starting to see it too." Sarah described his comments about reconsidering staffing decisions. "So this isn't just about fixing a conveyor system," Eleanor observed. "It's about fixing a flawed evaluation process." "Maybe." Sarah stretched her tired shoulders. "But first, we need to get this warehouse operational again. Tomorrow's the real test, connecting all the components and running initial trials." As she prepared for bed, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Carlos. "Local news is reporting on the innovative emergency solution at Mercer's warehouse. They're calling it a potential holiday shipping miracle if it works." Sarah smiled. The pressure was mounting, but so was the opportunity. Tomorrow would determine whether her bypass system functioned as designed, and whether her career at Mercer Industries ended in termination or triumph. Day 2 of the emergency repair project began with renewed urgency. Sarah arrived to find her team already preparing, their determination evident in their focused expressions. The warehouse floor had been transformed overnight. Conveyor sections now formed a complex bypass around the damaged central hub, and manual sorting stations stood ready for testing. "We're ahead of schedule," Carlos reported as Sarah reviewed the progress. "Night crew finished the eastern connection points. We should be ready for a test run by noon." Sarah nodded, mentally adjusting her timeline. "Let's do a section-by-section check first. I want to verify every connection point before we power up. The morning passed in a blur of final adjustments. Engineers checked electrical connections, maintenance crews lubricated moving parts, and Sarah's team prepared for the manual sorting procedures that would replace the automated system. Robert Mercer arrived mid-morning, accompanied by several corporate executives. "We have clients and media requesting updates," he told Sarah. "What can I tell them?" "We'll be ready for initial testing by noon," Sarah replied. "If all goes well, limited operations could resume by tomorrow morning." "That's remarkably fast," one executive commented, clearly impressed. "Ms. Ellis has been extremely thorough in her planning," Robert said, "and her team has executed flawlessly." As the executives toured the modified system, a new problem emerged. The engineering team discovered that the key transition point, where packages would move from the automated section to the manual sorting station, required a custom connector that would take days to fabricate using conventional methods. "We can't wait days," Sarah said, examining the gap in the system. "We need a solution now." The head engineer shook his head. "Without the proper connector, packages will jam at this transition point. The entire bypass becomes useless." Sarah studied the problem, considering alternatives. "What if we position someone here to manually guide packages across the gap?" "Too dangerous," the engineer replied. "The speed and weight of incoming packages would create serious injury risk." The team fell silent, the momentum of their progress suddenly halted by this unforeseen obstacle. "There might be another way," Sarah said slowly, an idea forming. "What if we create a cradle system? Something that slows the packages just enough to make the transition smooth, but doesn't require someone to handle each item directly. Like a deceleration ramp?" Carlos suggested. "Exactly. With the right angle and material." Sarah sketched quickly on her clipboard. "We could fabricate this from materials we already have on site." The engineer studied her drawing skeptically. The physics might work, but the positioning would be tricky. It would need to be installed in that confined space. He pointed to the narrow gap between conveyor sections and adjusted precisely. "How confined?" Sarah asked. "About 2 feet wide, 3 feet tall. Barely enough room for someone to squeeze in and attach the component." Robert frowned. "Do we have anyone small enough to work in that space?" Sarah measured the gap with her eyes, then glanced down at her own body, the very physique that had once been deemed unsuitable for warehouse work. "I can fit," she said. Carlos looked concerned. "Sarah, that's a tight space even for someone smaller." "I can do it," she insisted. "My size actually becomes an advantage here." The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. What had been perceived as a limitation was now uniquely valuable. The fabrication team worked rapidly to create Sarah's deceleration ramp according to her specifications. By 11:30, the critical component was ready for installation. Sarah prepared to enter the confined space, removing her safety vest to reduce bulk. The installation would require her to maneuver in the narrow gap, securing the ramp at precisely the right angle while working around moving parts. "This is beyond your contract obligations," Robert said quietly as she prepared. "We could try to find another solution." "This is the fastest way," Sarah replied. "And time is what we don't have." A small crowd gathered to watch as Sarah positioned herself at the entry point. The space was even tighter than it had appeared, barely wide enough for her shoulders when she turned sideways. "Once you're in position, we'll hand you the component and tools," the engineer explained. "You'll need to secure it at exactly this angle." He showed her the specifications once more. Sarah took a deep breath and began to squeeze into the confined space. The metal edges pressed against her as she inched forward, using her hands to guide herself toward the installation point. Despite the cool warehouse air, sweat beaded on her forehead from the effort and concentration. "You okay in there?" Carlos called. "Fine," Sarah grunted, though the position was uncomfortable at best. She reached the target location and extended her hand. Component. The engineer carefully passed the deceleration ramp through the gap. Sarah positioned it according to the specifications, holding it in place with one hand while the other accepted the power drill. The next 10 minutes required intense concentration as Sarah secured the component in the awkward space. Her arms burned from maintaining the uncomfortable position, but she worked methodically, checking alignments between each step. "Final bolt," she called, her voice echoing in the metal confines. When the installation was complete, Sarah began the difficult process of backing out of the narrow space. The fit was so tight that she couldn't simply turn around. Instead, she had to inch backward the way she had come in. As she emerged, dusty and sweating, a spontaneous round of applause broke out from the gathered workers. Even some of the Mercer executives joined in, recognizing the difficulty of what she'd accomplished. "Component is secure," Sarah reported professionally, brushing dust from her clothes. "We can proceed with testing." Robert handed her a water bottle. "That was impressive, Ms. Ellis. Not many would volunteer for such a confined space." Sarah took a long drink before responding. Sometimes the right person for the job isn't who you'd expect. The message wasn't subtle, but Robert nodded in acknowledgement. "Indeed. Let's see if your solution works." The team gathered around the control panel, tension palpable as they prepared for the first test of the bypass system. If Sarah's deceleration ramp failed, they would be back to square one with no time to develop alternatives. "Ready for initial power-up," the engineer announced, activating section by section. The warehouse fell silent as the engineer activated the first section of the conveyor system. Motors hummed to life, belts began to move, and all eyes focused on the makeshift bypass configuration that represented their last hope before the holiday shipping season. "Section 1 operational," the engineer announced. Moving to Section 2. Sarah watched intently, her heart pounding as each segment activated successfully. The true test would come when they reached the critical transition point where her deceleration ramp was installed. "Approaching transition point," the engineer warned. "This is where we'll see if the modification works." Robert Mercer stood beside Sarah, his usual corporate composure showing cracks of genuine concern. The executives watched from a distance, phones ready to report success or failure to headquarters. Activating transition sequence now. The conveyor before the gap accelerated to normal operating speed. Test packages began their journey through the system, moving steadily toward the critical juncture. The first package, a medium-sized box, approached the deceleration ramp. Sarah held her breath as it hit the ramp, slowed precisely as designed, and smoothly transitioned to the manual sorting section. The second package followed, then a third. "It's working," Carlos whispered, almost afraid to jinx their success. The test continued for 10 minutes, gradually increasing volume. Sarah's design held firm, the packages flowing through the system with remarkable consistency given the emergency modifications. A spontaneous cheer erupted from the team when the engineer finally announced, "Full test successful. The bypass is operational." Relief washed over Sarah, but she knew they weren't finished yet. "Let's run a full capacity test before we celebrate. I want to make sure it holds up under pressure." The engineer nodded, respecting her caution. Full capacity in 3, 2, 1. The system surged with activity as hundreds of packages began flowing through simultaneously. Workers manned the manual sorting stations, directing items according to Sarah's designed workflow. For several tense minutes, everyone watched for signs of failure or bottlenecks. None appeared. The bypass functioned exactly as Sarah had envisioned, handling approximately 70% of normal volume, more than enough to meet essential holiday shipping needs until permanent repairs could be completed. Robert turned to Sarah, genuine admiration in his expression. "You did it. You actually did it." Before Sarah could respond, a commotion at the warehouse entrance drew their attention. News crews had been allowed inside to document the holiday shipping miracle. As local media was calling it, camera operators positioned themselves for the best angles of the innovative solution, while reporters prepared for live broadcasts. "Mr. Mercer," one called out, spotting Robert. "Can you explain how your team managed to solve this crisis so quickly?" Robert hesitated, then made a decision that surprised Sarah. "Actually, this wasn't my team's solution. Sarah Ellis designed and implemented this entire bypass system." He gestured for Sarah to join him. Uncomfortable with the sudden attention, Sarah reluctantly stepped forward. "Ms. Ellis, you developed this emergency system?" the reporter asked, clearly intrigued by the unexpected storyline. "It was a team effort," Sarah deflected. "Everyone here contributed to making it work." "But the concept was yours," Robert insisted. "And you personally installed the critical component that makes it all function." As cameras captured the functioning conveyor system, Carlos nudged several other team members. They began telling reporters about Sarah's leadership, her technical knowledge, and her innovative approach to the crisis. The narrative quickly evolved from a corporate emergency response to a story about an unlikely hero who saved the holiday shipping season. Sarah found herself explaining the bypass system to cameras, demonstrating how the manual sorting stations supplemented the automated processes. Amid the media activity, Victor Mercer arrived. His expression darkened as he took in the scene, particularly the sight of Sarah being interviewed by local news. "What's happening here?" he demanded of Robert. "Why are there cameras inside our facility?" "PR thought it would help mitigate negative coverage of the breakdown," Robert explained. "Show that we've developed a solution quickly." Victor's gaze fixed on Sarah. "And why is she being interviewed?" "She's a temporary contractor. She's the reason this system is operational," Robert replied firmly. "Her design, her implementation, her leadership." For a moment, father and son locked eyes in silent confrontation. Then Victor strode toward Sarah, interrupting her interview. "Ms. Ellis," he said, his voice professionally cordial despite the tension evident in his jaw. "A word in private, please." The reporter reluctantly stepped back as Victor led Sarah away from the cameras. "This is quite the spectacle," he said when they were out of earshot. "You seem to have positioned yourself as the savior of our operation." "The system works," Sarah replied simply. "That's what matters." "What matters," Victor countered, "is understanding how this situation came about. You were terminated, yet somehow you've leveraged this crisis into a consulting role and media attention." Sarah met his gaze directly. "I didn't create the crisis, Mr. Mercer. I solved it, using capabilities you dismissed when you rejected my applications." The bluntness of her response clearly surprised him. For a moment, Victor seemed at a loss for words, perhaps the first time in his corporate career that someone had challenged him so directly. "Your contract ends when this temporary system is fully operational," he finally said, "which appears to be now." Sarah had expected this response, but before she could reply, Robert joined them. "Actually, Father, I've extended Ms. Ellis's contract through the holiday season," he stated. "We need her expertise to maintain this system and train staff on its operation." Victor's face flushed. "You don't have the authority." "As COO, I do," Robert interrupted calmly. "The board has already approved my emergency staffing measures, including bringing back several terminated employees with specialized knowledge of this facility." The confrontation might have escalated further, but at that moment, a loud cheer erupted from the testing area. The bypass system had successfully processed its first 1,000 packages without a single failure. Even Victor couldn't argue with success. He gave Sarah one last measuring look, then walked away without another word. As he departed, Eleanor's wheelchair appeared at the warehouse entrance, accompanied by Maya. They had seen the news reports and come to witness Sarah's triumph firsthand. Seeing her mother and best friend, Sarah felt the full weight of the moment. From rejected applicant to essential problem solver, Her journey had come full circle in the most public way possible. Eleanor's eyes shone with pride as she watched her daughter being celebrated by the very people who had once dismissed her. Maya stood beside Eleanor, phone raised to capture the moment Sarah had fought so hard to achieve. 3 months later, Sarah stood in the newly renovated training room of what was now officially Mercer Donnelly Distribution Center. The damaged conveyor system had been permanently repaired weeks ago, but her temporary bypass design had influenced the new configuration, incorporating manual quality checkpoints that improved overall accuracy. As you can see, Sarah explained to the group of new hires before her, our hybrid system combines automation with strategic human oversight. This reduces errors by 14% compared to fully automated systems. The trainees, a diverse group that included several individuals who might not have fit the traditional warehouse worker mold, took notes attentively. Sarah's reputation had spread throughout the industry after the holiday miracle made regional, then national news. "Any questions before we move to hands-on practice?" she asked. A young woman raised her hand. "Is it true you were rejected for a warehouse job before designing the emergency system?" Sarah smiled. The story had become something of a legend around the facility. "Yes, several times, actually. But that's a reminder that capability isn't always visible at first glance." After dismissing the training group for their lunch break, Sarah headed to her office, a small but functional space with operations specialist on the door. The title had been created specifically for her after her extended contract ended and Robert insisted on bringing her on permanently. Victor had objected, of course, but the board sided with Robert. The holiday season had proceeded without shipping disruptions thanks to Sarah's solution, saving millions in potential losses and preserving client relationships. Even Victor couldn't argue with those results. Sarah's new role encompassed training, system optimization, and facility operations, combining her inventory experience with the problem-solving skills she demonstrated during the crisis. Her salary had more than doubled from her initial warehouse position, and health benefits had allowed Eleanor to receive improved medical care. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Carlos entered, now wearing the badge of maintenance supervisor, another position created in the reorganization. "Your mother's here," he said. "In the cafeteria with Maya." Sarah checked her watch, surprised. "The cafe delivery isn't scheduled until tomorrow." "This isn't a delivery," Carlos grinned. "Seems more like a celebration." In the cafeteria, Sarah found Eleanor and Maya setting up a small spread of pastries and coffee. A cake box sat prominently in the center. "What's all this?" Sarah asked, hugging her mother. "Check the calendar," Eleanor prompted. Her health visibly improved from 3 months earlier. Sarah pulled out her phone, realization dawning. 1 year ago today. "Your first rejection at Meridian Shipping," Maya finished. "The day this whole journey started." The memory felt distant now, like a chapter from someone else's life. That rainy day on the loading dock, the foreman's dismissive laugh, the crushed application in her fist. All had led somehow to this moment. "We thought it deserved recognition," Eleanor said. "Not many people turn rejection into triumph quite so thoroughly." Maya opened the cake box to reveal a custom design. A conveyor belt made of frosting with "stronger than they knew" written across it. Sarah laughed, touched by the gesture. "This is perfect." As they shared cake with nearby coworkers who joined the impromptu celebration, Robert Mercer appeared in the cafeteria doorway. He approached their table with a smile. "Quite the gathering," he observed. "Mind if I join?" "It's an anniversary celebration," Maya explained. 1 year since Sarah was told she couldn't handle warehouse work. Robert nodded, understanding the significance. "Well, I have something that might add to the occasion." He handed Sarah an envelope. "The board approved it this morning." Inside was an official letter outlining a new company-wide initiative, the Capability Assessment Program. The policy explicitly required skills-based evaluation rather than appearance-based assumptions in all hiring and promotion decisions. Your experience exposed a significant flaw in our employment practices, Robert explained. This program aims to ensure we don't miss valuable talent in the future. Sarah read through the details, noting that she was named as the program's director. This is amazing, she said finally. Thank you. Don't thank me, Robert replied. This was entirely merit-based. The slight emphasis on his last words wasn't lost on Sarah, a gentle acknowledgement of how far things had come. After Robert departed, Sarah shared the news with Eleanor and Maya. From rejected to policymaker, Maya marveled. I'd call that a complete victory. It's more than that, Eleanor said thoughtfully. It's a legacy. This program will help others who might otherwise be overlooked. Later that afternoon, Sarah passed the loading dock where new shipments arrived. The space had been reconfigured during renovations, but she could still pinpoint the exact spot where she had stood that rainy day, facing rejection. On a whim, she walked to the spot and looked at her reflection in a nearby window. The woman who looked back was physically similar. Her size hadn't changed dramatically, but her posture, her confidence, her very presence had transformed. A new hire approached, hesitantly interrupting her thoughts. Ms. Ellis? I just wanted to say thank you for the training session today. I've been rejected from 3 warehouses before this one because they didn't think I could handle it. Sarah recognized herself in the young woman's determined expression. Well, here's your chance to prove what you can do, she said warmly. And please call me Sarah. As the new employee walked away, Sarah turned once more to her reflection. The journey hadn't been about changing her appearance to fit expectations. It had been about changing expectations to recognize her capabilities. She touched her employee ID, the title operations specialist, a tangible symbol of her triumph. Strength, she had discovered, came in many forms, physical, yes, but also the strength of perseverance, of conviction, of refusing to be defined by others' limitations. The reflection that smiled back at her wasn't just Sarah Ellis. It was the woman she had always been capable of becoming, once she found the strength to believe it herself.